Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on such themes as leadership, visibility, communication challenges. My guest today is Alison Arnoff, who's going to talk to us about meetings and how to get people enrolled in your idea. But before we go to the meat of the interview, I'd like to tell you about a free gift we have. It's this free 4-minute quiz called speakforresultsquiz.com. So that if you are curious about how your presentation skills are doing, where you're strong and where you might need a little bit of support, go to speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see your strengths and the places where a little support might get you better results and the recognition that you deserve. Alison Arnoff and I had a long, wide-ranging conversation about the stages of confident communication, how you can lead a better meeting or be in a better meeting, including a little bit of managing up. And it's got a lot of things about very concrete, specific tips, how you can run a better meeting, be better in meetings. The official bio of Alison Arnoff is that she's a former Division I swimmer and she's a retired triathlete. She has a 30-year record of success helping giants like Intel and KMC, plus 7 startups, which resulted in 6 exits. Alison empowers executives, leaders, and aspiring leaders to dare to be peak performers. She's always been a trailblazer. She received a master's degree in electrical engineering at a time when women with those degrees were rare. She started her career as an engineer before moving to sales, marketing, management, and leadership. She's also a competitive swimmer, and she's swimming at an elite level, has taught Alison that real growth happens by pushing outside your comfort zone. This is a principle that she's applied throughout her career and now applies with her clients. Supporting individuals to achieve their personal best is simply what she really does. During her corporate career, Alison mastered the challenge of customer adoption of emerging technologies, creating product roadmaps, building and closing large, complex 7-figure deals, and leading effective teams. The core principles underneath her success and the success of her teams was coherent and effective communication and empathetic leadership. She's been an analyst for a venture capital firm, doing her best Shark Tank impression, as well as consulting with tech companies in their sales and marketing strategy. She's a facilitator for World Business and Executive Coaching Summit, on the advisory board, a member of several tech companies, and she advises several startup accelerators. I think you're going to really enjoy my conversation. Here's to the talk with Alison Arnoff. Alison Arnoff, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Well, I'm glad to be here, Elizabeth. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks. I'm so excited, so happy that we connected because we have so much to talk about. I have all sorts of questions for you, but I'd like to start with the question I ask all my guests. Who would be your dream interview? If you were to interview someone from history, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
Yeah, great question. So my person would be Marie Curie, who, did a lot of, she won the Nobel Prize for chemistry, I think, and physics, first person to do both. But she did it in the time where women were not supposed to have a voice. She actually had to get her college degree. There was a secret women's university that was moving around, that was hidden to get her degree. They were trying to give her husband credit for her ideas without her. She had to deal with anti-Semitism as well. And yet she pushed through, and she did not let what society said her role was supposed to be stop her. And she even created the portable X-ray machine used in the battlefields. I mean, she did so many amazing things at a time where women were supposed to just be in the background. And so, I just love to ask her how she found that fortitude, no matter how many times she had been told that. How did she find that fortitude to keep pushing forward?
I never knew about the traveling secret university. What was this? I'd never heard that part of the story.
Yeah, so basically women were not allowed to get higher education. And so there was a university for women, but they had to move around because they could be arrested for teaching women.
Very interesting. I'm going to have to go and look that one up then. University. I'm going to look that up and put it in the show notes.
Okay.
That would be good, because that really makes the story even more interesting. I'm really excited to have you here on the podcast, because we were talking about how do you run better meetings or be seen better in meetings and enroll people in your ideas, which might sound like three different conversations, three different questions, but it's all one thing, I think. And I know you teach courses in this. Where could we start?
Well, I'd love to share an anecdote with you from, I did a workshop on confident communications, and I had a wide range of women in there, from 30-year IBM executives, founders.
You were teaching, right?
I was teaching it. And we went through what I call the 4 stages of confident communications. And the first one is mindset. And the mindset, over at a high level, is really the belief that what you have to say deserves to be heard. And one of the things we talked about was that if you're invited to a meeting, if you're invited to a conversation, they've already decided they value what you have to say. And that was the number one thing. We went through all the skill set of how to prepare, how to execute, how to learn from that. But the almost unanimous most learning was the reminder that their voice deserved to be heard. And they just almost needed permission to find their voice again. This was all women. And so it's really interesting that sometimes we just need a basic reminder that our word is important.
With mindset, which is so important, how do we sabotage ourselves then as women? How do we sabotage ourselves if we forget that?
Well, we have these voices in our head, and they're often not our own voices. They're a boss from the past. It's a parent. It's a bully. It's someone in our past that we end up giving their voice way too much power.
Oh, you've met my mother then. Yes.
My mom are probably having tea right now. Yes. Yeah. And it's a voice that says you're not worthy, you don't deserve, you're not good enough. And for some reason, we give power to those voices. And so I actually have this 8-stage process of how to stop those voices. And the first thing is to acknowledge the voice and understand whose voice is it really. And then you kind of go through what's really true in that voice, because there might be some learning in there, but then it's really what is it trying to protect you from? And I'm a big believer in everybody needs a champion, because we have to, ultimately you want to be your own best champion, but it takes time. And I'm a big believer to have champions. So when you have that big meeting, who's that person you need to talk to before that meeting that's going to give you that? Or it could be a song. I actually have a song. I was a competitive athlete, and I have a song that ELOs don't bring me down. So when I have a big meeting, I'll put that on beforehand to get me in that victory mindset. So it's really about acknowledging that, okay, this is a voice. It thinks it's trying to protect me. It really isn't. And how do I counter that voice? And a champion is the best way to start with that.
I love it. I love it. With the voices in our heads, let's say that we're acknowledging and recognizing the voices in our head, but there are also things we say that deposition ourselves, that pop out of the mouth without the brain intending it, right? Or I don't know about you. I mean, my mouth often runs without my brain behind it. So talk to us a little bit about that, please.
Yeah, it's interesting because as women, sometimes we don't want to be too much. We're trying to make sure we're heard, and then, we're told we're too much. And so we go to the other extreme and we start minimizing our words. I'm not sure, but I thought this might be a good idea. And maybe we could try this, and all these things that just basically say, I'm not sure you should be listening to me.
Mm-hmm.
And it really is about, and I have a reputation of being very direct. I'm a street kid from Chicago, and I don't buffer things the way other people do. So as a woman, it took a lot of people off guard as a woman in tech, because I didn't do those minimizer words. But I also got heard and I got seen, and I got a reputation of someone to listen to. And so as women, we need to own our intelligence and own our gifts. We can work on how we deliver it in a way, like we were talking about, that enrolls people in it, but we don't have to minimize our brilliance to make people comfortable. We can find a way to communicate it, but not minimize it.
It's those unconscious words such as, I'm sorry, excuse me, or raising your hand in a meeting, saying, hello, can I get permission to speak, instead of just speaking.
Yes.
And you never see a guy raising his hand.
No.
And there's a whole things. Those of you who are listening, if you check my website, I have a whole episode all about that, about the words not to say. So talking about mindset, is there more to mindset in your 4 stages of confident communication?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to the mindset, but it really has got to be a belief. If it does, it's. I mean, I can go through all the different pieces, but it really is. You got to give yourself permission to be imperfect. I'd say that would be the other big one. There's lots of little ones, but a lot of us overachievers, and especially women, we have this expectation of perfection, and if it's not perfect, it's not worthy.
Mm-hmm.
And yet perfection is a myth that we can never achieve. So therefore we are never worthy. And so not only understanding the voice, but giving yourself permission to be imperfect, to know that the words might not come out perfect. Everything, you can't, you might rehearse everything, and that's okay, that you can still be impactful and meaningful and not perfect.
I love that. I love that. What's the next stage then?
It's preparation.
Yes. Okay.
And that goes big. We were talking about meetings. It's really, preparation is obviously the work, right? What are you going to present? But it's even further. It's a big part of that is understanding the outcome. Like if I am going to be, leading the meeting or presenting ideas, what is the outcome I want, and by who and by when? Mm-hmm. We throw a lot of ideas out there, and then we don't bound them. And so we just kind of trust that others in the room are going to take action on our great idea. And so there really is, preparation. Make sure you know who in that meeting you really want to enroll, and what are you going to ask of them. It's also, if you found that you might be a voice sometimes when you're the only, right? The only woman, the only minority, the only, it's good to get pre-built consensus. Figure out who are your potential champions in that meeting that you can say, hey, I'm going to be throwing a new idea out there, and I'd love to hear your opinion in the meeting. I want to make sure that it doesn't get glossed over to the next idea. Well, can I get your support in the meeting on that? So, pre-building, consensus. I don't know how many meetings I wish I'd done that ahead of time, but, everyone's so ready to get their ideas out that often they're so quick on to the next idea. So enrolling people ahead of time is another thing I believe in preparation, to make sure that there's a pause on there.
That's a great point. I talk a lot about allies on this podcast, on this series, about enrolling your allies, but also telling them in advance that you're going to mention an idea, and please make sure that it gets heard. Because yes, of course, we've all seen the people who have no time to listen because they're so busy thinking about what they're going to say next.
And it's also a mindset shift of thinking that that's weak, asking for support. And it's actually quite smart. to be doing that. It's like, if this is something that's important to you, set yourself up for success. And you can do that by, getting people pre-building consensus. The other thing that I remind people about is, and this is more, is to make sure that you role model the behavior that you want. If you want people to be commenting on your ideas, make sure you're commenting on other people's ideas. So you really have to make sure that you're not so focused on what you want to say and that you're planning to do that you're not being present for others.
As in, if you want to enroll allies, you should be an ally.
Yes.
Yes, yes, exactly. What if you have an idea? What if you suddenly have an idea, but you haven't thought it through yet? But it's important. It should be part of the conversation. What's the best way to present that and be heard, even if you haven't fully fleshed it out?
It's speaking up. Obviously, wait for the appropriate time and say, I have an idea. And don't minimize it too much, like saying it's not fully fleshed out. Just, so we got to make sure that in the process of trying to protect ourselves from not having a fully formed idea, we don't minimize our idea, right? So that's the interesting quandary there. But it really is saying, I think there's something here we can explore about X. And sometimes I think you ask specific people in the room their thoughts on that. You're basically not allowing the conversation to continue, and then you can say, Joe or Fred, I know this is something that you guys had looked into. What's your thought on this? So I also believe that you should get other people involved in the conversation. And so it does slow the tempo down a little bit.
Exactly. Slowing the conversation down so that there's room for you to be heard. What makes, where so many of us are in meetings all day long and we're dealing with Zoom fatigue. And there's so many people who are scheduling meeting after meeting after meeting. How can we do better meetings and maybe not have to do so many of them?
Well, it's about bounding them, have a very clear goal of what the goal of the meeting is, what the outcomes you're looking for. And if it takes 5 minutes, just end it in 5 minutes. And to just have meetings, make sure everybody is enrolled in the agenda and the outcome. Make sure that everybody that wants to have a voice is heard, and then when you're done, be done. But I think there's so many meetings, and think about the meetings in your calendar. And, this is more time management. Do I need to be there? Is there someone that can be there instead of me? If you're setting up meetings, does this really need to be an hour? Best practice, say, these are going to be 15-minute meetings.
I love it.
This is the agenda. This is, and then how you can help with that is to be concise. And being concise, besides the obvious things, as you had mentioned, there's so much noise in people's brain all day. So if you want to cut through the clutter, the best way to do that is simple, clear, to the point. Make sure it has, and you also have an expectation. What is the goal of this communication? I want you to know X, Y, Z. Would you be able to get back to me your thoughts by Thursday? Great. Okay, done. Right. It's just, we gotta respect the noise in everybody's head, cut through it, and don't assume that they know what to do with the information we give them.
That's a good point. Making sure that you follow through and figure out what they want to do. Yeah, that one was a hard one for me to learn back in the day. I would have these great ideas. I hoped somebody would pick up on them, and I didn't realize I had to actually ask. I've still got a few wounds from that one, of times where I was not the world's best boss because I didn't understand that.
Yeah, I call it completing the sentence.
Complete the sentence. Okay.
Yeah, make sure you complete the sentence so that everybody knows what the expectations is and by when.
Oh, great. Say that you are not running the meeting, that you're a member of the meeting. Let's talk a little bit about managing up. How can you help your managers be better managers or communicators?
Well, let's look at it from let's use a sales meeting as an example, right? You have to think about, your boss has to go in there every week and provide an update. And that update has to be major deals timeframes, obstacles, any challenges for that. So to have that information available for your boss, if you use a system like Salesforce, is Salesforce updated to do that? Do you come to the meeting with your numbers clear and ready? It doesn't have to be sales, whatever your boss's weekly accountability that they have to provide. Are you giving them clear data that they have to get from multiple people? They don't make them chase you down. Don't make them ask for updates. Keep them, make sure that you're providing the tools. If you start doing that, it's amazing how much more you're going to get listened to. It's amazing how much more is going to show up for you, because they're going to appreciate that you made their job easier.
Yes, putting yourself in the shoes of your listener is. How do you think about dealing with the competition mindset, the scarcity mindset, the ones who are, if you're strong and competent and good at what you do, what about the ones who are people who are threatened by you?
Well, let's talk about what context. Let's give that some context. What context would be interesting for you in that?
Say a coworker who say you've got a colleague who cuts you off, who does everything they can to minimize whatever you've said.
I know that one quite well. And what I've always done is I've said, I'm excited to hear what you have to say when I'm done. And we've had a chance to hear some comments on it. And then I look forward to hearing what you have to say. My friends joke around. I put my hand up a lot. I'm a cyclist in traffic. Some women believe in putting their hand up. It's just basically saying, wait a minute, and then just keep talking. Right. The biggest thing is to keep going, and you can acknowledge them in some way, which is like, I love your enthusiasm. I can't wait to hear your idea when I finish mine.
Okay.
But you have to do that. You can't just let them talk over you. You have to own your ground. And I know it's hard, especially for the introverts and certain cultures. But unfortunately, especially in tech, which I know a lot of your listeners are in, you really have to make sure to own your voice in that room.
When somebody dismisses you or diminishes you during a meeting, obviously you don't stop them right there at the meeting, but how do you suggest handling it when someone has just depositioned you and diminished you after you have spoken?
Well, it's very situational. It really depends on the person. If I have a boss that is very aware of those types of conversations, I trust that they will address that. I have addressed it with a boss before. I'll give an example. I had somebody just cut me off and talk over me like I didn't exist. I don't think it was a woman issue. He would have done that to anybody. And I just pulled my boss aside later and I just said, I knew he was a good guy and I knew he cared. And I just said, I get it. That's who he is. And you guys have all accepted that because he's a top performer, but you've just validated bad behavior. And basically are saying that in that moment, I didn't matter when you allow that to happen. And he got it. And he turned out to be one of the best champions that I've ever had as a boss. But I also knew that he was someone that was open to that conversation.
Yeah.
But I was not going to let it go because that was unacceptable to me. I typically would not take it to my peer. I would just make sure that in the next meeting, and I might speak up after that in the meeting. Again, I'm a little more fearless than the average person. I will accept consequences to speak up for myself, but I would always say, thank you for those additional thoughts. But I'd like to add to that. So I would probably, if it was appropriate, we'd have the last word.
Okay. What if it's another woman who's threatened by you, who's undermining you?
It's really interesting. It's unfortunately there's this, like you said, a scarcity mindset, and there's only room for one. It depends on the person. If I felt like there was a chance there, I would invite them out to lunch and say, I'd love us to find ways to work together to support each other in the organization and see what they say. But I don't, if I feel like there's a chance, if I can tell that they're just out for themselves, I wouldn't treat them any differently than any other male colleague. I would just make sure that I have my ducks in a row and my facts and data when I speak up. And I would make sure that if my ideas were challenged, that I would tactfully defend them afterwards.
Let's go back to the whole idea of meetings and enrolling people in an idea.
Yes.
Can you expand on that?
Often when we have ideas, they might be challenging the status quo, and people can be defensive. And so I notice a lot of my clients have a habit of making people wrong before they present their idea. And so my favorite word is and.
Okay.
Instead of but or. And so to really think about enrolling people in an idea is like, I would kind of state the goal. What I heard was our common goal is to accomplish XYZ, and this is on the path we're on. I think an additional way to do that is XYZ. I'd love to open it, especially if I'm leading it, I would love to open to discussions. And let people feel like, first off, you're not saying what they did is wrong. You're valuing their input, and you make it an interactive conversation. Often one of the mistakes leaders make is they walk in there with an idea that they are going to execute, and it doesn't matter other people's thoughts. And by allowing them to have input to the conversation, first, you might learn something.
Right.
And second is that people just want to feel part of the process. It really isn't that hard. Yes, I know we're all crunched on time, and so it'd be easier to say, this is how we're doing things. But to enroll people in an idea is to just let their voices be heard and not make them wrong for having different choices or different thoughts than you do.
I certainly remember in my opera days directing, having to learn to let the singers do something their way. My way was still right, of course, but my way was still right, but I could let it go and have it be another way. It didn't really matter, but I would still think my way was right. But if it was more important for them to do it their way, that was a challenge, learning as a leader to do that.
One of the biggest challenges people have with their leaders is not feeling like they're heard. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the number one reason people normally leave is because of their boss.
Right.
And so just giving them a chance, you might have the goal or the outcome that you believe is the right way, or it could be even the company mandate. But just to say, this is one of the challenges we have for the quarter. How would you guys see doing it? Great. Well, the company is thinking about this approach. What are your thoughts on that? It's just including them in the dialogue versus going in there and saying, okay, from now on, we're doing it this way.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about how, having been a pioneer yourself and rising to the top, what was it that made you go into coaching?
Well, it's funny. From the outside looking in, I've had a great career. From the inside looking out, it was harder than it needed to be. It really was. I always knew, even at a young age, that my next phase of my career was in service. It took a while for it to formulate into what coaching was. But for me, there were so many times that my communication was probably too abrupt. I made people wrong before I made them right. I mean, someone would present ideas and I didn't realize how much I minimized their work because I was so excited about sharing my idea on top of theirs. I didn't have anybody to help me understand my strengths along the way. I didn't have a thinking partner. Sometimes in leadership, you have to be together and you can't show that vulnerability. And so I want to be that person for others that I wish I had had on my journey, that thinking partner, that champion, that challenger, help them find their blind spots and their biases and help them maximize their gifts and maximize the gifts of all the people around them. And so I'm just trying to be what I wish I had.
I love that. And then we pass on what we've learned or what we wish we had learned. Yeah, absolutely. Alison Arnoff, it's been such a delight to have you here on Speakers Who Get Results. Can you go through the 4 stages of confident communication again, please?
Yeah, so the first is mindset. And at a high level, it's just a belief that what you deserve to say deserves to be heard and is valued because you've been invited. It's preparation, which isn't just the material, it's understanding the impact, the audience, the outcomes that you want. It's pre-enrolling people in it. It's execution, being concise, listening, modeling the behavior that you want there, and making sure that you are being the positive role model for others that you're asking for yourself. And then the fourth is growth, because we have more than experience to do this. And so I'll share with people how I debrief myself, because I used to not be very kind to myself. And I found a way to debrief. So the first thing is I ask myself 3 questions after everything. I'll probably do it after this.
Okay.
The first thing is, what did I like about what I did today? The second is, what did I learn from today? And the fourth is, what would I like to work on?
Wait, what did I like? What did I learn? And the third, yeah.
Third, what do I want to work on? And that's so much kinder than what did I do wrong?
It's too easy to go to what did I do wrong, right? Yeah.
So those are from the growth standpoint, that's what I recommend. Just ask yourself those 3 questions. And also know, in most cases, we're not one and done. We are going to get more opportunities to present ideas, to run meetings. And so just go through the continuous learning and be kind to yourself in the process.
I love that. That's wonderful. Alison Arnoff, how can we find out more about you?
Well, you can, if you're interested, the number one thing that people do to get in their own way, you can go to idaretobemore.com, and you'll get a download that will tell you that. And then if you stay on the mailing list, you'll even get more information about confident communications. You'll get some examples of some clients and some of the shifts that they had to make. So and it's the number 2. 2 is, 1 is for mindset, 2 is for skill set. So idaretobemore.com, and they can learn about getting out of their own way.
Well, thank you so much for having been a guest on Speakers Who Get Results. We will be putting all that information in the show notes and as we talk about it. And for you, dear listeners and viewers and readers, we're delighted to have you here. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'm your host, Elizabeth Bachman. And let me remind you that if you are curious about how your presentation skills are going, whether they're helping you or not, you can take our free 4-minute quiz at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can see where you are strong in your presentation skills and where perhaps a little support could get you better results and the recognition that you deserve. Alison Arnoff, thank you so much for having joined us.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed our time together.
Okay. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.